Gemini, don't tell everything. Someone is testing your wisdom. There's something important I need to share with you, something that may shift the way you see recent conversations, sudden silences, and the people who've been watching you more closely than you realized. You've always been a natural communicator, a weaver of words, a magnetic storyteller, someone who brings light to any room just by speaking truth with charm and grace. But now, the very gift that once protected you is being tested. Someone near you isn't just listening to what you say. They're listening for what you don't say. And that silence, or lack of it, could define everything that comes next. What if I told you that your future opportunities, your most intimate relationships, even the doors you're waiting for the universe to open, depend not on what you're willing to express, but on what you're wise enough to withhold? We begin a journey together, not to silence your voice, but to help you recognize when your words serve your soul and when they subtly betray your growth. Take a deep breath. You were guided to this message for a reason. If it resonates with you at any point, let your heart speak in the comments below, like this video to help it reach other Geminis on the edge of evolution, and subscribe for more healing truths from Esoteric Wisdom. Gate 1. The Test of Silence. When wisdom is louder than words. Gemini, let me begin with the truth you might already feel in your body but haven't yet named. Someone close to you is testing you. Not to manipulate, not to hurt, but to measure something sacred within you. Your discernment, your emotional maturity, your ability to know when to speak and when to hold your tongue like a prayer on the tip of your heart. You may have noticed it already, those oddly specific questions people ask lately. Not invasive exactly, but deliberate. Questions about your plans, your relationships, your beliefs. They feel casual, innocent even. But if you've walked away from those conversations feeling just a little unsettled, as though you revealed too much, you did. This is no coincidence, Gemini. This is a divine checkpoint in your journey. Because for someone like you, born under Mercury's wing, communication is your sacred art. You speak to connect, to clarify, to spark curiosity and reflection. But now, that very gift is being refined. The universe is asking, can you communicate with restraint? Can you express without overexposing? Can you hold back, not because you're hiding, but because you finally understand the power of mystery? Think of the people in your life right now. Maybe a boss, a new love interest, a longtime friend who has grown quieter around you. One of them is observing, watching not just your words, but your patterns. Do you rush to answer every question fully? Do you overshare when silence gets awkward? Do you give away pieces of your inner world just to fill the space between breaths? This is the test, Gemini. And no, you won't get a warning bell. It won't arrive as a bold confrontation. It comes in whispers, a lingering glance after you speak, a pause that feels longer than usual, a sudden change in the energy of a room when you reveal something personal. These are the micro moments where your wisdom is being quietly weighed. One Gemini I once worked with, let's call her Elena, was going through a period of transition in her career. She had big dreams, but kept getting overlooked for promotions. She couldn't understand why. She was charismatic, confident, well-liked. But when we looked closer, we saw the pattern. In every meeting, every lunch break, she shared too much. Her ideas, her frustrations, her private thoughts. Not because she was careless, but because she craved connection. It wasn't until she began practicing intentional silence, choosing her words like sacred offerings, that things shifted. Within months, she was offered a leadership role. Why? Because people started seeing her not just as clever, but as wise. This is your invitation now, Gemini, to transform from speaker to strategist, from communicator to conscious curator. The person testing, you may not even know they're doing it consciously. But on a soul level, they are asking, can I trust you? Can you carry something precious without leaking it? Can you receive without always needing to reply? To pass this test, you must become deeply aware of what drives your words. Is it a need to impress? To be liked? To avoid discomfort? What if silence became your teacher instead? The most powerful people in any room are rarely the ones who speak first. They're the ones who know the value of a well-timed pause, the potency of a brief reply, the elegance of simplicity. Gemini, your voice will always be your gift, but silence is your graduation. In the next few days, begin to observe how you show up in conversation. When someone asks something personal, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, do they need to know this? Or do I just want to be seen? Speak when it feels aligned, not just because the moment expects it. The test is active now, but so is your wisdom. Gate 2. The loss of innocence. What happens when you overshare with the wrong soul? Gemini, you've always been curious, an eternal student of human nature. You collect stories the way others collect souvenirs. But in your search to understand the world, you've often forgotten one crucial truth. Not everyone who listens deserves access to your inner world. This gate opens with a wound, a memory you may not talk about often, but one that shaped your caution. Think back. Was there a moment when you shared something vulnerable, maybe with a friend, a colleague, a lover, and they mishandled it? Maybe they repeated it. Maybe they used it against you. Or maybe they simply didn't hold it with the sacredness it deserved. And something in you dimmed. You started to question your instincts. You began to second-guess your openness. This is the heartbreak that comes from oversharing with the wrong soul. Not because you were weak, but because you were honest. You wanted to be seen, understood. And in return, you were evaluated, exposed, or worse, betrayed. Gemini, you've told yourself for years that your openness is your strength. And it is. But every strength, when unchecked, can become a vulnerability. The truth is, when you speak too quickly, when you fill silences with self-revelation, when you offer your secrets to untested hands, you are not connecting. You are leaking. Slowly, silently. And eventually, you forget where your edges begin and end. Let me tell you about a Gemini man I once worked with. We'll call him Noah. He had a magnetic personality, and people always seemed to open up to him. He thought that meant he should reciprocate equally, offering details of his personal life to maintain balance. But over time, he noticed that the more he shared, the more people took, but gave very little back. One day, after a casual conversation at work, a private detail he'd shared showed up as office gossip. It shattered something in him, not just trust, but his own perception of his role in that betrayal. He hadn't been tricked. He had volunteered the information, unguarded, assuming safety where none had been promised. Gemini, this is what I mean by the loss of innocence. It's not just the pain of being misunderstood. It's the realization that discernment must precede disclosure. You are now being asked to enter a more refined relationship with your voice. That doesn't mean closing your heart. It means anchoring it, holding it in a sacred place until another soul has earned their way there. Here's what most people don't realize. True intimacy isn't built by telling everything. It's built by revealing what's real, when the timing is right, and when the other person has shown themselves to be a safe container for your truth. In your younger years, you may have confused attention for connection, Gemini. You thought if they're listening, it means they care. But now, your spirit is wiser. It asks, are they holding this with care? Or are they simply collecting stories they do not intend to protect? The wrong soul will ask questions not to understand, but to compare, to control, or to feed their own emptiness. And if you're not careful, you'll hand them the map to your most vulnerable terrain, thinking you're building a bridge, when in truth, you're opening a gate that should remain locked until trust proves itself. There is no shame in your openness, beloved. But now, you must pair it with discernment. Begin to notice how people respond to your silences, not just your stories. Watch who stays curious when you don't offer easy access. Pay attention to who respects your privacy without pressure. These are the ones worthy of your truth. Because here's the deeper magic, Gemini. What is not said often carries more power than what is. Your restraint can create intrigue. Your discretion becomes a form of spiritual elegance. And your boundaries begin to define your worth more loudly than your voice ever could. You do not owe anyone your full story on the first page. Let them read slowly. Let them earn each chapter. Let your silence become the proof of your transformation. Gate 3. The sacred art of spiritual discernment in soul connections. Gemini, now that you've begun to understand the cost of careless speaking and the wound of revealing too much to the wrong soul, it's time to go deeper. Because the truth is, you never overshared just for attention. You did it for love, for trust, for the hope that someone, finally, would meet you where you live, beneath the surface, beyond the laughter and layered thoughts. And that longing, Gemini, is sacred. You weren't just seeking companionship. You were seeking communion. A soul that wouldn't just hear your stories but feel them. Someone who would hold space for your chaos without needing to fix it. Someone who would not be afraid of the speed of your mind or the depth of your feelings. You wanted what every true heart wants, to be known. But here's where the lesson deepens. Because some souls are not ready to know you, and your desire to be seen cannot override your responsibility to protect your spirit. Spiritual discernment is the gift you're being asked to awaken now. Not suspicion, not guardedness, but awareness. A soft, fierce clarity that lives in your solar plexus and whispers, "Not everyone who smiles is safe. Not every open hand deserves your tenderness." Gemini, how many times have you met someone and thought, this is it, this is the one who gets me? You shared your favorite memory, your hardest year, the story of that one person you still dream about. And for a while, they seemed to hold it all. But then they disappeared, or shifted, or suddenly looked at you differently. And that ache in your chest wasn't just about rejection, it was about betrayal. A sacred part of you was handed over and they didn't know how to carry it. This isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that your spirit is calling you to discern before you reveal. You see, Gemini, the soul has gates. And those gates are not meant to open wide for every passing traveler. Some must wait. Some must knock. Some must prove, through patience, integrity, and resonance, that they belong inside your story. Think of it this way. If your inner world were a garden, who have you allowed to walk barefoot across it without asking if their steps were clean? Let me share the story of another Gemini, someone I met in a healing circle many years ago. Her name was Rena, a poet, a healer, but someone who kept finding herself in spiritual partnerships that left her drained. "I don't understand," she told me. "I always lead with honesty, with depth. I give people all of me. Why do they leave when I show my soul?" And I told her gently, "Because you are showing them the temple before you even know if they believe in reverence. You are the temple, Gemini. Your mind, your words, your sacred silence. These are altars, and they must be protected." Discernment doesn't mean doubting everyone. It means watching with your heart and your spirit. It means listening not just to what someone says, but how your body responds when they say it. Do you feel expanded or smaller? Do you feel safe or slightly performative? Do you feel peace or pressure? The right soul will never rush your gates. They will wait at the door. They will meet your boundaries with grace. They will not need your secrets to feel close to you. They will want your presence first, and your story second. So let yourself become a mystery again, Gemini. Not to hide, but to heal. Reclaim your sacred privacy. Speak your truth only when the space is sacred enough to echo it back with love. Let your silence be a spell that calls in only the worthy. Let your restraint be a rite of passage for those who seek your closeness. And when that one soul finally arrives, the one who doesn't flinch at your stillness, who asks nothing but listens to everything, who gives you permission to say less and feel more, you will know. Because in their presence, you won't feel the need to explain yourself. You will simply feel home. Gate 4, the invitation to step into quiet power and protect your light. Gemini, now that you've walked through the gates of silence, boundaries, and soul discernment, a new invitation stands before you. Not one of words, but of energy. You are being called, not just to withhold unnecessary speech, not just to guard your sacred truths, but to embody something even deeper. Quiet power. This kind of power isn't loud. It doesn't need to dominate a room or outtalk the crowd. It radiates. It hums beneath the surface. It says, "I know who I am, even when I say nothing at all." Quiet power is what happens when you finally stop seeking approval and begin living in alignment. Gemini, this may feel unfamiliar. After all, you've spent so much of your life using your voice to build bridges, solve conflict, comfort others, and make sense of chaos. Your words have been your lanterns in the dark, your way of tethering yourself to the world. But now, Spirit whispers something new. What if your presence alone is enough? What if you didn't need to explain, justify, narrate, or entertain? What if the very act of being still, in your truth, in your wisdom, could become your strongest form of communication? Let me tell you about a Gemini man named Theo, a musician, a thinker, a man with stories for days. For years, he was known for his charm, his quick wit, his endless insight. But underneath, he often felt overlooked, even used. People came to him for ideas, for comfort, for distraction, but few ever truly saw him. Until one day, he stopped. He began to speak less, observe more. When people asked questions, he paused. When conversations turned superficial, he stepped away. Slowly, his world changed. Some friendships faded, but in their place, new ones emerged, quieter, deeper, more sacred. Theo had become a lighthouse, not by shining brighter, but by anchoring deeper. Gemini, this is your moment to do the same. It begins with reclaiming your energetic field, with realizing that not every invitation is meant for you, that you don't need to attend every conversation, that silence can be a spell, and presence, your greatest protection. You see, when you've spent years pouring yourself into others, you forget that your energy is precious, that your voice carries frequency, that your attention is a currency, and not everyone deserves it. Now is the time to shift from reaction to intention. Let your power rise, not from performance, but from presence. Be selective with your energy. Give your light only to those who tend to it. And here's something miraculous that happens when you do. The world begins to adjust around you. The noise fades. The people who stayed for the performance quietly exit. And the souls who are meant to walk beside you, they appear. Drawn not by what you say, but by what you radiate. You become the mirror that reflects truth. The still water that invites others to see their own reflection. The sacred space where only love and integrity are allowed to enter. And suddenly, your life feels quieter, but also more full. Gemini, you've done the inner work. You've learned to pause, to discern, to protect what matters most. Now, step into this new phase. Let the stillness speak. Let the silence lead. Let your boundaries form the container where your true brilliance can finally shine, unrushed, unbothered, and completely free. Conclusion. A new era of Gemini wisdom begins. Gemini, if you've made it here, truly present, heart open, soul stirred, then you've crossed a threshold. One that few talk about, one that many avoid. The threshold of inner mastery. This journey was never about silencing you. It was about refining you, about helping you remember that your words are not only powerful, they are sacred. And when used with intention, with clarity, with discernment, they heal, they lead, they magnetize. You have learned that not every silence needs to be filled, that your wisdom does not diminish when unspoken, that your worth is not measured by how much of yourself you give, but by how carefully you protect your light. Gate by gate, you've reclaimed pieces of yourself that were scattered through oversharing, overexplaining, and overextending. You've gathered them back into the temple of your soul, where they belong. This is the birth of a new version of you, not louder, not faster, but deeper, wiser, grounded in presence. The Gemini who once felt pressured to perform now moves with quiet power. The Gemini who gave too freely now gives with grace and discernment. The Gemini who longed to be seen now sees themselves, and that changes everything. There is still more ahead, of course. Life will continue to test your voice, your boundaries, your ability to remain aligned in a world that often rewards noise over truth. But you now carry the blueprint, the spiritual compass, the knowing. You've tasted the freedom that comes from speaking less and listening more, from choosing yourself first, from waiting until the energy is right. So now I ask you, what kind of relationships will you call in now that you've chosen to honor your sacred space? What kind of opportunities will unfold now that you've shown the universe you can hold its wisdom in silence? What kind of Gemini are you becoming now that you've remembered your truth does not live in your voice alone, but in your presence? If this message awakens something within you, share your journey with us in the comments. Let your words be a light for another Gemini still finding their way home. Like this video if your heart feels seen. Subscribe to Esoteric Wisdom so we can walk this path together, gate by gate, truth by truth, breath by breath. You're not alone. You never were. This is only the beginning.